Hey gang, got a real old-timer here today. This is a Harmony Archtop made between 1937 and 1944. You know that time period when people used to talk like this? The headstock is really the coolest thing about it. This is a Harmony Vogue. If I was RuPaul, I'd be inserting a Paris is Burning reference here. But let's not stand here, we'll get to it. We'll strike a pose, I'm told there's nothing to it. Actually, lyrically, that's just kind of lazy, right? Rhyming to it with to it. She got away with stuff. This is going to be a resurrection rather than a restoration. I'm just going to make it as playable as it can be as it stands. The tuners look like the old Ping brand. Pretty ubiquitous replacement tuners. I always thought that was the weirdest choice of name because the last thing you want to hear from a tuner is a pinging sound. So we're going to swap these ones out for something that looks like this. There are two tight little cracks in the top, one running from the point of the F-hole and the other alongside it. We'll put some glue in there just to be on the safe side. There's a little length of binding that's loose around the tail end here on the back. And then there's the bridge. It's folk art, a chunk of 2x4. The top is sunk and warped between the braces, and to be honest, there's no way to use a standard adjustable archtop bridge on this. It's just going to be too low. And doing a neck reset is outside the budget, so I'm going to make something that kind of melds with the top architecture here. Hopefully it'll be functional. It's never going to have that orchestra-dominating volume that you want with an archtop of this era, but that's okay because we're also going to be putting in an inexpensive transducer pickup. There's an inscription in the soundboard here, traces from long ago. Not easy to read. This says Hill. Is it a name? That says Y-D-R-E-S. Yidres. Drays. Y-Drays. Well, maybe that's not a D. That could be a P. It would be Yeep, which is a battlefield in Belgium from the First World War. The doughboys would have called it wipers. That's really interesting. Just Josh, and that's the C in front of it. It says Cypress Hill, y'all. Insane in the membrane. Let's go ahead and remove these unexciting tuners. That, my friends, is a lot of holes. It looks like Swiss cheese. Emmentaler, perhaps. I'll plug those up using some 1/8 inch dowels, which I sharpen in a pencil sharpener, get some glue on those, stick them in, clip them off, let that dry, and I'll pare them down later. I'm going to glue this on. Just looking at this, I can see there's previous touch-up work that's been done with the marker at some point. And these spots of missing lacquer right around here, I'm wondering whether this had previously come loose and been glued down. And then the tape had just been pulled off without too much care. I'll do my best to clean out underneath it. Which adhesive to use? Tight Bond or fish glue? As I mentioned recently, acetone-based glues are great for gluing on new celluloid binding, but on this really old stuff, weird things can happen if you replasticize it. It really does turn into cheese sometimes. Not Swiss this time. More like an overripe Stilton. It's time to glue the cracks. I'm pushing up from the inside using my little finger as much as I can. Get quite a lot of glue on the surface and pump it down in with the suction cup. I'm cleaning the area around the lower point of the F-hole because I want to put a cleat there. It's sort of a problematic spot. It's where cracks like to start. So I figured the best way of doing this was to get the cleat inside the guitar first, hold it in position with my finger, and then put the glue on it there, rather than trying to slip it through the F-hole. Didn't want to risk it falling down and hitting the filthy back of the instrument and picking up a lot of grunge. I'm paring down the plugs. Anybody read Braille? And we'll get those in place. I think that looks a lot better. It's much more in keeping with the aesthetic of the instrument. I'm going to work on the bridge, planing up a piece of wood here. Then to mark its position out, I hold a straight edge along both sides of the neck and figure out those lines and measure in between them. To transfer the strange topography of the top to the bridge blank, I'm using a washer here as a follower for my pencil. That gets me in the ballpark after I've bandsawed it out. To refine the fit, I'll use sandpaper in the area of the bridge, sand back and forth. You can see how eccentric it looks. That gives me an impression of the high spots, and I can go ahead and scrape those down some and then go back to sand some more. Eventually we get something that fits the waviness pretty well. I'm taping the lead from a mechanical pencil onto this straight edge here, and I can use that on the top surface of the frets to scribe the radius onto the bridge. If I plane down to that, I'll end up with something that's about the right height. So here's the semi-complete bridge. You can see that I routed a slot and added a separate saddle, ebony in this case, not unlike something you'd find on a standard flat top. The owner had suggested making a one-piece bridge, but in my experience that's a can of worms on an old archtop like this. You want the adjustability, if only to make the initial setup easier, let alone future adjustment. With a one-piece, you've basically got to hit your mark right the first time, and adding string tension can really mess up the measurements. Okay, we're going to get into the crazy part of this procedure now, and that is we're going to be installing a transducer pickup system. This is an inexpensive Asian import based kind of on the K&K style thing, 3 dots. These are larger than the K&K ones. The crazy thing is, of course, how do you manipulate these inside an archtop guitar with F-holes? And one that has longitudinal braces in it as well, quite high ones. It's not like I can just stick my finger in there and push them where they need to be. Nobody's finger is that long. The short answer is I made a bent rod. It's got a dowel glued to it. I can double stick tape the transducer pads to that, get it through the F-hole, using a mirror on the inside, look down and push these up where they need to be. So positioning the pickup in there is still going to be a major hassle, I think. I've gone ahead and I've measured in from the edge of the sound hole to plot out the position of those longitudinal braces. And as it turns out, those are pretty narrow in the region of the bridge, such that we can only really get 2 of these transducer dots. They're pretty large in between the braces. But that's okay because they basically take up the entirety of the string spread. So even though this has 3 of them, I'm probably going to dispense with 1 and just go with 2. Looking in there and making sure they're in the right spot, like you don't want these to get too far off the center line of the saddle. You end up with weird imbalances and stuff. So yeah, again we're back to this, how am I going to find out where that is? I can look down inside and see a mirror, which I put through one of the sound holes. The borescope is not as helpful here as you might think it might be. It does not want to look upwards very well. I tried, and the field of view it does not focus all that well. It would be like, it's blurry, and it's also, there's some weird visual distortions that happen, so I don't think it's an option. I'm going to do something which I would not normally do in a different guitar, but knowing the customer that we're doing this for and its value, I'm actually going to drill a hole in the top, right where the center line of the bridge is, and it's just going to be a little 1/16 of an inch hole, and I can suspend the drill bit right through there. This is always going to be covered in regular use. It's going to be covered by the bridge. You'll never see it. But I do need some kind of visual cue to let me know that I'm in the right spot when I'm pulling up with the pickup. Again, this falls under the, that's completely insane, why would you do that thing? But sometimes you got to do it. I'm checking to see how thick the end block is. Some of them are too thick for a standard jack to go through. Oh, there's the pick that went missing in 1957. You can also see just how dirty a guitar can get if it's left outside a case and just standing in the corner for 80 years. Gross. And there's also evidence of some repair. There's a big glue run there from the end block. I think the top had probably come loose at some point. drilling for the output jack on an Archtop, sometimes it's a good idea to suspend the guitar in such a way that the shavings fall outside the instrument rather than in. I'm going to have to grind a little bit of the tailpiece away so I can make the strap button fit. This is my jack barrel on a string fishing device, which I'll shove down into the guitar and manage to extricate. That means that I can attach this to the jack and fish that in through from the F-hole. And going back and forth, I can adjust the length of barrel that's exposed so that I have the proper number of threads. Get that tightened up properly and put the cap on. I want a good clean surface to which I can adhere the pickups, so this is a naphtha soaked rag on the end of the rod, and by checking my progress in the mirror there, I'll scrub back and forth on the underside of the top and get that as clean as I can. Then the delicate procedure of getting the pickups into place. These had a peel and stick adhesive on them, but I actually had to go back and replace that with super glue, like you would on a K&K pickup, after one of them detached about an hour later. You wouldn't want that happening down the road in a guitar that you can't get your hand into. So yeah, this was all a bit of a nail-biter, this operation. There they are, looking very at home. Then I had to stick one of those little peel and stick wire holders in place on the back with a hemostat. I can mark for the proper placement of the bridge and also figure out the height it should be. Here I'm planing down the saddle. No, I'm not going to cut my fingers. This thing was missing its pick guard, and it really does look kind of naked without it, so we better make one. I'm just tracing the outline of the top onto the tortoiseshell guard material here. Come up with a shape and use various drawing implements to make sure the curves are fair. I like this one. It's got a bunch of little plastic tracks that move together, and you kind of squinch them up and you can make all kinds of curves. This is going to get stuck to the top. It's got to be lower than a lot of Archtops just because of the geometry involved here. I'm going to scrape a slight bevel on the edges to clean them up. So I'm using cork as a standoff for the places where it touches the top. I'm just going to use peel and stick. And then for the outrigger here, I've just made one up out of a simple L bracket, hardware store L bracket. I'm going to mark for a hole and I'll put a bolt through that. We're all set. Everything looks okay and it functions. I actually had to go back the next day and pin the bridge in place with two little pins. The roller coaster in the top slopes towards the bass side, and the string tension wanted to pull it off center towards the player. It was already starting to slide in these shots, but I hadn't noticed it. Anyway, we'll play it a little bit. It's actually pretty fun.